The Galactic celebration lasted exactly 3 days before reality set in, and everyone realized that eliminating the Void Swarm had created a power vacuum that would reshape civilization throughout known space. Ambassador Ray stood before the reformed Galactic Council in chambers that had been rebuilt on Earth, rather than the traditional neutral territory that had hosted diplomatic meetings for centuries. The message she delivered was simple, direct, and completely non-negotiable. Humanity had saved the galaxy from total destruction, but Earth would not be returning to its previous status as an ignored newcomer on the periphery of civilized space. Human interests would now be protected by the same systematic efficiency that had eliminated the swarm, and any species that threatened those interests would face the full capabilities of human military technology. The terms of the new galactic order were presented as facts rather than proposals, subject to debate or modification. Species that had secretly collaborated with the swarm would face human justice administered through military tribunals that operated according to human legal principles rather than traditional council procedures. Planets that had refused to support the war effort would pay reparations calculated to fully compensate for the resources humans had expended, saving civilizations that had been unwilling to save themselves. Director Jung established the Human Colonial Authority, with headquarters on 12 different worlds throughout what had previously been considered neutral territory. The HCA would oversee settlement of former swarm-controlled regions while ensuring that human colonies received priority access to the most valuable planets and resource deposits that had been liberated during the war. The galaxy discovered that humans were as efficient at building civilization as they had been at destroying enemies. Human engineering teams could terraform barren worlds in decades rather than the centuries required by traditional methods. They used techniques that other species considered environmentally destructive, but which produced results that could not be argued with. General Tay commanded occupation forces on 17 worlds that had previously served as swarm staging areas. His soldiers established military bases designed to support extended deployment throughout the galaxy, while human civilians began arriving to establish permanent settlements in regions that offered strategic or economic advantages. The expansion was not technically conquest because humans did not need to fight battles against organized resistance. Instead, they simply moved into areas that were either uninhabited or controlled by species that lacked the military capability to prevent human settlement. The process was systematic, thorough, and completely legal according to salvage laws that humans had researched extensively before beginning their expansion. Admiral Yuna established naval bases in star systems that provided strategic control over major shipping routes, while human merchant fleets began offering transportation and trade services that gradually made other species dependent on human economic networks. The services were reliable, efficient, and competitively priced, but they also gave humans detailed information about every aspect of galactic commerce and industry. Dr. Mina opened research facilities on worlds that offered unique scientific opportunities, while human companies began extracting resources using methods that maximized efficiency rather than environmental preservation. The galaxy learned that human industrial capacity could be scaled up to levels that dwarfed the combined output of all other known civilizations when resource extraction was organized according to human principles. But the most significant change was psychological rather than political or economic. Every species in the galaxy now understood that their continued existence depended on avoiding conflicts with humans who possessed weapons and strategies capable of eliminating entire civilizations if they determined that such elimination served human interests. The Corvan military attempted to reassert control over their traditional sphere of influence, only to discover that human forces had established permanent bases throughout their territory during the war against the swarm. When Corvan commanders demanded the removal of human military installations, Admiral Soon explained that the bases were necessary to prevent future threats from emerging in regions where previous conflicts had demonstrated inadequate local defensive capabilities. The Alterian government protested human settlement of worlds that had been designated as protected cultural sites under previous council agreements. Ambassador Chris responded by providing detailed intelligence records showing that Alterian officials had been negotiating secret agreements with swarm representatives during the war. The evidence included communication logs proving that the Alterians had offered to provide human colony locations in exchange for promises that their homeworld would be spared from attack. The revelation destroyed any remaining moral authority that traditional council species claimed over galactic affairs. If the galaxy's most respected civilizations were willing to betray their allies to save themselves, then they had no standing to criticize human methods or question human decisions about post-war territorial arrangements. Lieutenant Hay commanded security forces that investigated collaboration between various species and swarm forces during the 300-year war. The investigations revealed a pattern of secret negotiations and betrayals that explained why conventional military strategies had failed so completely. Many council members had been more concerned with preserving their own civilizations than achieving victory against the common enemy. The evidence was presented to galactic media outlets through information networks that humans had established during their expansion across former swarm territory. Unlike traditional council-controlled news services, human media organizations reported facts without diplomatic filtering or political censorship. The galaxy learned uncomfortable truths about their leaders and their own willingness to sacrifice others for personal survival. Captain Min established training programs for alien military officers who wanted to learn human tactical methods. The programs were open to any species willing to adopt human approaches to strategic planning and resource allocation. Students learned that effective warfare required abandoning traditional concepts of honor and fighting to achieve complete victory, regardless of cost or moral considerations. The training was voluntary, but species that refused to participate found themselves increasingly isolated as human influence expanded throughout the galaxy. Military alliances required compatible strategic doctrines, and most alien approaches to warfare had been proven ineffective against any serious threat. Only human methods had achieved decisive results when galactic survival was at stake. Major Yoon commanded reconstruction efforts in star systems that had been devastated during the war against the swarm. Human engineering teams rebuilt infrastructure, using designs that prioritized function over aesthetic considerations, while human economists established trade relationships that gradually integrated local economies into human-controlled commercial networks. The reconstruction was genuinely beneficial for populations that had suffered under swarm occupation, but it also created dependencies that made independence from human influence practically impossible. Planets that relied on human technology and human trade could not risk conflicts that might result in the withdrawal of services their populations needed for survival. The galaxy realized that humanity had achieved something that no previous galactic power had accomplished. They had established control not through conquest or intimidation, but by making themselves indispensable to the continued functioning of interstellar civilization. Every species now depended on human military protection, human economic services, or human technological assistance. Colonel Bora presented strategic assessments showing that human influence extended throughout 90% of inhabited space within 5 years of the war's conclusion. The expansion had been achieved without major battles or forced occupations. Instead, humans had simply identified what other species needed, and then provided those services more efficiently than anyone else could manage. But underlying all human, civilian activities was the knowledge that Earth possessed military capabilities that could eliminate any threat completely and permanently. The galaxy had seen human forces destroy an enemy that had defeated every other civilization for 3 centuries. No one wanted to discover what would happen if humans decided that another species represented a threat to galactic stability. The new order was not based on fear alone, but fear was certainly part of the foundation. Species cooperated with human initiatives partly because those initiatives were beneficial, but also because the alternatives were too dangerous to consider. Humanity had demonstrated that they viewed problems in terms of permanent solutions, rather than temporary accommodations. Ambassador Ray concluded her final report to Earth Command by noting that the galaxy had achieved a level of peace and stability that had not existed for centuries. Trade flourished under human protection, while scientific research advanced rapidly with access to human technology and methods. The elimination of existential threats allowed civilizations to focus on growth and development rather than survival. But the peace existed because everyone understood the rules of the new galactic order. Humans would protect and support species that Commander Thalos stood in front of the big screen showing his army positions. His four eyes looked at the red dots that marked where his soldiers were supposed to be. But the dots kept disappearing one by one. 300 of his best fighters had gone missing on the planet called Kepler, 442b, and nobody knew what happened to them. The planet looked peaceful from space with green forests and blue rivers. Nothing dangerous should be living down there. The humans who lived on this world were supposed to be weak and stupid. They had just learned how to travel between stars a few years ago. How could they fight against the mighty Crexian Empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds? Thalos walked around the command room feeling worried. His soldiers were the best in the galaxy. They had special armor that could stop bullets and energy shields that protected them from explosions. Each soldier carried weapons that could blow up a house with one shot. Yet somehow they were all gone. His communication officer made clicking sounds with his mouth, which meant he was nervous. The officer said, "Sir, the last message came from Captain Vex's unit. They said they found one human target and were going to catch him." Then everything went quiet. Human Thalos could not believe it. His mind tried to understand how one weak human could defeat 300 trained warriors. Maybe the humans had secret weapons or invisible ships helping them. But the scanners showed nothing unusual, just empty forest down on the planet's surface. Park Ji-ho crawled through thick bushes carrying his rifle. The Korean man had been a sniper in his country's army for 10 years before joining the space exploration team. When his ship crashed on this world 2 months ago, he thought he would die alone in the wilderness. But the human research colony found him and brought him to their small base. Dr. Kim Nari, the scientist who led the colony, showed him their simple computers that could detect ships coming from space. She pointed at the screen where hundreds of alien ships were heading toward their planet. Ji-ho looked at the peaceful scientists and engineers who lived in the colony. They studied plants and animals and had never hurt anyone in their lives. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no way to protect themselves. When the alien army arrived, they would all be killed or taken as slaves. The doctor asked Ji-ho if he could help defend them. He looked at his hunting rifle and the small amount of bullets he had left. It seemed impossible that one man with an old gun could stop an entire alien invasion, but Ji-ho remembered his training and the promise he made to protect innocent people. He spent 3 weeks preparing for the invasion. Ji-ho walked through every part of the forest, learning where to hide and where to shoot from. He found caves to store extra bullets and food. He marked the best paths for moving quickly without being seen. He turned the entire forest into his hunting ground. When the alien ships finally landed, Ji-ho was ready. He watched from a hilltop as the blue-skinned creatures marched out of their ships. They wore shiny armor and carried weapons that glowed with energy. They moved in straight lines like robots, making it easy to predict where they would go. The aliens spread out to search for the human colony. They moved in groups of 10 with one leader giving orders to the others. Ji-ho studied their pattern for hours, waiting for the perfect moment. Then he saw his chance. The alien patrol walked through a narrow valley between 2 hills. Ji-ho had positioned himself on the high ground with a clear view of the entire area. He controlled his breathing, like his training taught him, and aimed at the alien leader. The electromagnetic pulse rifle he took from their crashed ship was much better than his old hunting gun. Ji-ho squeezed the trigger once the energy beam hit the alien commander right in the center of his chest. The creature fell down dead before he could make a sound. The other aliens looked around confused, trying to figure out where the shot came from before they could react. Ji-ho was already moving. He used ropes he had set up earlier to swing down from the hill and run to a different hiding spot. By the time the aliens reached where he had been shooting from, he was already a kilometer away, setting up his next shot. This became Ji-ho's pattern for the next few days. He would wait for alien patrols to enter areas where he had prepared hiding spots. Then he would take one shot and immediately move to a completely different location. The aliens never saw him, never caught him, never even came close to finding him. Each shot was carefully planned. Ji-ho did not waste bullets on random targets. He aimed for the alien leaders and the ones carrying the biggest weapons. When he killed their commanders, the other aliens would panic and make mistakes. This made them easier targets for his next attack. The forest became a nightmare for the alien soldiers. They tried to use their advanced technology to find the human sniper. Their heat sensors could not detect him through the thick trees. Their motion detectors picked up every small animal and blowing leaf. Their communication devices only told them that more soldiers were dying. Jiho moved through the forest like a ghost. He knew every tree, every rock, every stream. The aliens with their heavy armor and glowing weapons could never move as quietly as he could. They crashed through bushes and stepped on dry leaves, making noise that he could hear from far away. Dr. Kimnari and her team helped by giving Jiho information about alien movements. They had hidden cameras around the forest that could show him where the enemies were going. This let him plan his attacks perfectly while staying completely safe. After 1 week of fighting, the alien army had lost almost half their soldiers. They had not even seen the human colony yet because they were too busy trying to catch one man with a rifle. The invasion that was supposed to take 1 day had turned into a deadly hunt, where they were the prey instead of the predators. Commander Thalos received reports that made no sense. His soldiers described impossible shots from distances that no weapon should be able to reach. They told stories of an enemy who could disappear into thin air and appear anywhere at any time. Some soldiers refused to leave their ships because they were too scared. The commander looked at his tactical display and saw that his invasion had completely failed. One human had defeated his entire army without ever showing his face. Thalos began to understand that humans were much more dangerous than anyone had believed. This was only the beginning of a legend that would spread fear throughout the galaxy. The alien soldiers no longer slept well at night. Every small sound in the forest made them jump and point their weapons at shadows. The wind blowing through trees sounded like footsteps. The calls of native animals sounded like human voices whispering threats in the darkness. Park Jiho understood that winning this war required more than just killing enemy soldiers. He needed to break their will to fight and make them too scared to do their jobs effectively. This type of warfare attacked the mind instead of the body and could be much more powerful than bullets. He began using tactics designed to create fear and confusion among the alien forces. Instead of always killing his targets immediately, Jiho would sometimes wound an alien soldier and let him live long enough to tell others about the attack. This spread stories that became more frightening each time they were told. Dr. Kimnari helped him understand alien psychology and culture. She had studied different alien species for years and knew what they feared most. The Crexians were proud hunters who were terrified of becoming prey themselves. The insect-like Vorthak feared being separated from their group mind. The crystal creatures called Nexari could be driven insane by disrupting their harmonic communication. Jiho used this knowledge to design attacks that would have maximum psychological impact. When he fought Crexian soldiers, he would stalk them for hours, letting them know they were being hunted before finally striking. When he encountered Vorthak units, he would kill their communication specialists, first leaving the others confused and panicked. For the Nexari, he learned to disrupt their crystal communication devices with electromagnetic pulses. This broke their connection to each other and made them feel lost and alone. The fear and confusion this caused was worse than physical pain. The human sniper also began leaving calling cards at the sites of his attacks. He would carve symbols into trees or arrange rocks in patterns that had special meaning to alien cultures. These messages told stories of death and defeat that spread fear throughout the invasion force. One of his most effective tactics was the Phantom Patrol. Jiho would track a group of alien soldiers for an entire day, staying just out of sight but making sure they knew he was there. He would break branches, snap twigs, and leave footprints where they could be seen, but never allow the aliens to get close enough to shoot at him. By the end of the day, the alien patrol would be exhausted and terrified. They would return to base with stories about being hunted by an invisible enemy who could have killed them at any time but chose to let them live. This psychological torture was often more effective than an actual attack. The aliens tried to counter his psychological warfare by using their own fear tactics. They broadcast messages throughout the forest, promising rewards for information about the human sniper. They threatened to destroy the entire planet if he did not surrender. But these threats only made Jiho more determined to fight. Commander Thalos watched his army disintegrate under the psychological pressure. Soldiers who had been brave and confident when they arrived now jumped at every sound and refused to patrol alone. Medical officers reported increasing numbers of nervous breakdowns and stress-related illnesses. The commander tried to maintain discipline by punishing soldiers who showed fear, but this only made the problem worse. His troops began to see him as another threat instead of a protector. Some units stopped following orders completely and barricaded themselves in defensive positions. Captain Mora warned Thalos that his army was losing the war without ever seeing the enemy. She explained that the human was using ancient hunting techniques that attacked the mind and spirit instead of just the body. This type of warfare could defeat even the most advanced army if it went on long enough. The psychological pressure was made worse by the fact that nobody had actually seen the death shadow clearly. A few soldiers claimed to have glimpsed a figure moving through the trees, but their descriptions were all different. Some said he was tall, others said he was short. Some claimed he wore alien armor, others insisted he looked like a normal human. These contradictory reports made the death shadow seem even more mysterious and dangerous. The aliens began to believe they were fighting something supernatural rather than just a skilled human soldier. This fear made them less effective in combat and more likely to make mistakes. Dr. Kim Nari monitored alien communications from her hidden base and learned that their morale was completely broken. Soldiers talked about deserting, officers discussed retreat. Many aliens expressed doubt about whether their invasion could ever succeed against such a determined enemy. She shared this information with Jiho, who realized that his psychological warfare campaign was working better than he had hoped. The alien army was defeating itself through fear and paranoia. Even if reinforcements arrived, they would inherit an army that was already broken in spirit. Jiho continued his attacks, but now focused on maintaining the psychological pressure rather than just killing enemies. He would let some patrols return safely after being stalked all day while completely destroying others. This unpredictability kept the aliens constantly on edge. The forest itself seemed to become his ally. Every tree could hide a sniper. Every shadow could conceal an ambush. Every sound could be the last thing an alien soldier would ever hear. The death shadow had turned a peaceful wilderness into a living nightmare for the invasion force. After 3 weeks of psychological warfare, the alien army existed more in theory than in practice. They had hundreds of soldiers, but most were too scared or traumatized to fight effectively. Their equipment was intact, but nobody wanted to use it outside the relative safety of their base commander. Thalos finally understood that he was not just fighting one human sniper. He was fighting against the entire concept of human determination and the willingness to never surrender no matter how impossible the odds. This was a type of enemy his species had never encountered before. The alien reinforcement fleet approached the Kepler system with confidence. Admiral Korax had brought 500 fresh soldiers and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. He expected to find Commander Thalos' forces in control of the planet and ready to begin mining operations. Instead, he received a desperate transmission from Thalos explaining that the invasion had completely failed. One human had defeated an entire army and was still hunting the survivors. Admiral Korax thought this must be some kind of joke or perhaps a sign that Thalos had suffered a mental breakdown. But as his ships entered orbit, the evidence became impossible to ignore. The landing zone that should have been a bustling military base looked like a graveyard. Wrecked vehicles and abandoned equipment were scattered across the clearing. Most of the soldiers were hiding in underground bunkers, afraid to come outside. Park Jiho watched the new alien ships arrive through his telescope and knew that his time was running out. Even the best sniper could not fight against impossible odds forever. He had delayed the invasion for weeks, but now thousands more enemies were coming to the planet. Dr. Kim Nari contacted him through their secret radio channel and told him about the energy readings her sensors were detecting. The new ships carried weapons that could destroy the entire forest from orbit. If Jiho could not find a way to stop them, the human colony would be wiped out along with every living thing on the planet. Jiho had been thinking about this possibility for days. He knew that eventually the aliens would bring enough force to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. But he had discovered something during his weeks of fighting that might Give him one last chance to protect the colonists. 3 weeks earlier, an alien patrol ship had crashed in the mountains after Jiho shot down its engines. The wreckage contained a powerful energy weapon that was still functional. Dr. Kim Nari and her engineering team had spent days studying the alien technology, trying to understand how it worked. The weapon was designed to be mounted on a spacecraft and could fire energy beams powerful enough to punch through thick armor plating. With careful modifications, it might be possible to turn it into a massive sniper rifle that could reach targets in orbit. The plan was incredibly dangerous and had almost no chance of success. Jiho would need to carry the heavy weapon to the highest mountain, peak, transport enough power cells to operate it, and then make an impossible shot through atmosphere at a target moving at orbital velocity. Dr. Kim Nari ran calculations on her computers and shook her head. The mathematical problems were staggering. Atmospheric distortion, planetary rotation, orbital mechanics, and target movement all had to be perfectly accounted for. A single mistake in any variable would cause the shot to miss by thousands of kilometers. But Jiho had made impossible shots before, and he knew this might be the only way to save the colony. The alien fleet would not wait long before beginning bombardment operations. He had perhaps one day to prepare and execute his plan. The team worked through the night modifying the alien weapon and preparing it for transport. Jiho studied orbital charts and practiced with the unfamiliar targeting systems. The weapon used alien mathematics and displays that took hours to learn how to read properly. Dr. Kim Nari identified the most vulnerable target in the alien fleet. The command ship carried Admiral Korax and contained the main computers that controlled the entire invasion force. If that ship could be destroyed, the other vessels might retreat, or at least delay their attack, long enough for help to arrive. She explained that the command ship's reactor core was protected by multiple layers of armor, but the modified weapon should have enough power to penetrate the defenses if aimed at exactly the right spot. The reactor was located in the center of the ship and would explode spectacularly if hit properly. Jiho loaded the massive weapon onto a makeshift sled and began the difficult journey to the mountain peak. The weapon weighed over 200 kilograms, and the power cells added another 100 kilograms. It took him 6 hours to reach the summit using ropes and pulleys to move the equipment. At the top of the mountain, he set up the weapon and connected it to the power cells. The alien technology hummed, with barely contained energy that made his teeth ache. The targeting computer displayed orbital information in symbols that still looked like alien writing to him. Dr. Kim Nari guided him through the final preparations over their radio link. She had calculated the exact moment when atmospheric conditions would be optimal and the target would be in the perfect position. The window of opportunity would last only a few seconds. As the sun set, Jiho lay behind the massive weapon and watched the alien command ship move across the starfield. Through the scope, it appeared as nothing more than a bright dot, but he had memorized its specifications and knew exactly where to aim. The modified weapon felt strange compared to his familiar rifle, but the basic principles remained the same: breath control, steady aim, and perfect timing. He had spent his entire career preparing for shots like this, even though he never imagined the target would be in space. Dr. Kim Nari's voice crackled over the radio, telling him that the moment was approaching. All variables were aligning perfectly. The fate of the colony and possibly the entire human species depended on what happened in the next few seconds. Park Jiho felt the alien weapon vibrating against his shoulder as its energy systems reached full power. The targeting display showed dozens of numbers and symbols that represented atmospheric conditions, orbital mechanics, and target position. All of the calculations had to be perfect for the shot to succeed. Dr. Kim Nari's voice came through the radio with final updates on target position and timing. She had spent hours running computer simulations to find the exact moment when all variables would align. The command ship would be visible for only 3 seconds through a gap in the planet's atmospheric distortion. Jiho controlled his breathing and focused on the bright dot moving across the night sky. Through the weapon scope, he could barely make out the shape of the alien vessel. It looked impossibly small and far away, but he had trained for long-range shots his entire career. The Korean sniper remembered his first day at military academy, when his instructor told the class that sniping was not about fancy equipment or special powers. It was about patience, discipline, and the willingness to take responsibility for every shot. A good sniper never missed when lives depended on accuracy. He thought about Dr. Kim Nari and her, peaceful researchers who had never hurt anyone in their lives. They had welcomed him when his ship crashed and treated him like family. Now they were depending on him to save them from destruction. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than the massive weapon in his hands. The targeting computer began beeping rapidly, indicating that the optimal firing window was approaching. Jiho steadied himself against the weapon stock and placed his finger on the trigger. The energy buildup made the air around him crackle with electricity. 3 seconds, Jiho tracked the moving target through his scope. The command ship was following a predictable orbital path but at enormous speed. One tiny mistake in timing or aim would send the energy beam harmlessly into empty space. 2 seconds. The atmospheric readings on his display turned green, indicating perfect conditions for long-range shooting. The planet's rotation was carrying his position into ideal alignment with the target. All of the mathematical calculations were coming together. 1 second. Jiho exhaled slowly and felt his heartbeat slow down. Time seemed to stop as his training took over. Every muscle in his body relaxed except for his trigger finger. The shot had to be perfect because there would be no second chance. He squeezed the trigger. The modified alien weapon discharged with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. A beam of pure energy lanced upward through the atmosphere, glowing so brightly that it was visible even in daylight. The weapon bucked against his shoulder with tremendous force. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The energy beam traveled at light speed, but the target was so far away that it took several seconds for the results to become visible. Jiho kept his eye pressed to the scope, watching the command ship continue its orbital path. Then the ship exploded. The explosion was like a new star being born in the night sky. It outshone every other object in space for several seconds, before fading into expanding clouds of glowing debris. The shockwave was so powerful that pieces of the destroyed ship became visible as they burned up in the atmosphere. Jiho allowed himself one moment of satisfaction at making the impossible shot. Then he realized that his problems were just beginning. The weapon's discharge had created a pillar of light that revealed his position to every alien soldier on the planet. They would all be heading toward his mountain within minutes. He tried to move the massive weapon, but the energy discharge had overloaded its power systems. The alien technology was smoking and sparking, making it impossible to fire again. Even if he could carry it, the weapon was now completely useless. Dr. Kim Nari voice came over the radio telling him that the aliens were launching everything they had toward his position. Aircraft were taking off from their base, and ground vehicles were racing through the forest. All of their remaining forces were converging on the mountain. Jiho abandoned the destroyed weapon and grabbed his original rifle along with his remaining ammunition. He had perhaps 30 bullets left and would soon be facing hundreds of angry alien soldiers seeking revenge for their destroyed command ship. The Korean sniper began moving down the mountain using every piece of cover he could find. Behind him, he could hear the sound of alien aircraft approaching. They were flying search patterns trying to locate his exact position before landing their troops. He reached a defensive position among some large rocks and set up his rifle. The aliens would have to climb up the mountain to reach him, which meant they would be exposed targets moving uphill against a dug-in sniper. It was not a fair fight, but at least the terrain was in his favor. The first alien aircraft landed about halfway up the mountain, and soldiers began advancing on foot. They moved more carefully than before, having learned to respect the deadly accuracy of human weapons. But there were too many of them for one sniper to stop. Jiho picked his targets, carefully aiming for officers and heavy weapons specialists. His shots were perfectly accurate as always, but for every alien he killed, 3 more took their place. The enemy had finally brought enough force to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. More aircraft arrived carrying fresh troops and heavy equipment. The aliens set up energy cannons that could blast apart the rocks he was hiding behind. They had learned from weeks of fighting and were no longer making the mistakes that had allowed him to survive so long. As the battle intensified, Jiho realized that his ammunition was running low. Each shot had to count because he would not have many chances left. The aliens were advancing steadily up the mountain despite his accurate fire. Dr. Kim Nari called him on the radio to report that the destruction of the command ship had caused chaos in the alien fleet. Some ships were retreating, while others seemed unsure what to do. The invasion had been disrupted, but not completely stopped. She also warned him that more alien troops were approaching from other directions. They had surrounded the entire mountain and were closing in from all sides. Even if he could hold his current position, other enemies would soon attack him from behind. Jiho made a decision that he knew would probably cost him his life. Instead of trying to escape, he would make his final stand at a position that blocked the path to the human colony. Every alien that wanted to reach Dr. Kim Nari and her people would have to go through him first. He moved to a narrow pass between two peaks, where the terrain would force the aliens to attack in small groups. This position could not be flanked and offered excellent fields of fire, but it was also a trap that he would never be able to escape from. The final battle was about to begin. Park Jiho reached the narrow mountain pass just as the first wave of alien soldiers appeared on the slopes below him. The pass was only 20 meters wide, with steep cliffs on both sides, making it impossible for the aliens to surround him. They would have to attack straight up the middle where his rifle could pick them off one by one. He checked his ammunition count and found only 18 bullets left. After weeks of fighting with captured alien weapons, he was back to his original rifle and the handful of rounds he had saved for emergencies. Each shot would have to kill an enemy because there would be no second chances. The aliens advanced up the slope in small groups using rocks and bushes for cover. They had learned to respect his accuracy and no longer moved in the open formations that had made them easy targets during the early days of fighting. But Jiho had also learned their tactics and could predict where they would try to take cover. His first shot took down an alien officer who was directing the attack from behind a large boulder. The second shot killed the soldier carrying their heavy energy cannon. The third and fourth shots eliminated two aliens who were trying to flank his position by climbing the cliff face. The aliens pulled back and called for reinforcements. Jiho used the pause to study the approaching enemy forces and plan his defense. Through his scope, he could see hundreds of soldiers gathering at the base of the mountain, along with vehicles and aircraft that would soon join the attack. Dr. Kim Nari's voice came through his radio with updates on the alien fleet in orbit. The destruction of the command ship had created confusion among the remaining vessels, but they were beginning to reorganize under new leadership. It would only be a matter of time before they resumed bombing operations. She also reported that human rescue ships had detected the battle and were heading toward the planet, but they were still days away and would arrive too late to help with the current situation. Jiho was completely on his own for what might be his final fight. The aliens launched their second attack with overwhelming force. Aircraft strafed his position while ground troops advanced from multiple directions. They had brought enough soldiers to absorb his accurate fire and still reach his defensive position. Jiho worked his rifle with mechanical precision, each shot carefully aimed at the most dangerous targets. He killed pilots, medical officers, and communication specialists. Anyone who had special training or equipment became a priority target over regular infantry soldiers, but there were simply too many enemies for one man to stop. His ammunition ran out after killing 15 more aliens, leaving him with only his sidearm and whatever weapons he could capture from the dead. The aliens sensed his weakness and pressed their attack with renewed intensity. Jiho drew his pistol and continued fighting at close range. When that weapon ran out of ammunition, he picked up an alien energy rifle and used it until its power cell was exhausted. Then he grabbed another weapon from a dead enemy and kept shooting. The battle raged for over an hour with waves of alien soldiers attacking the narrow pass. Jiho held his position through determination and tactical skill, using the terrain to his advantage and making every shot count. But his body was taking damage from enemy fire, and he was slowly running out of weapons. As his strength faded, Jiho thought about the peaceful researchers in the colony below. Dr. Kim Nari and her team represented the best of humanity. They spent their lives learning and creating, instead of fighting and destroying. If his death could give them a chance to escape, then the sacrifice would be worthwhile. The final alien assault came at sunset with everything the enemy had left. 3 aircraft attacked simultaneously, while over 100 soldiers charged up the slope. Jiho stood in the center of the pass firing captured weapons until they ran out of power, then throwing rocks and fighting with his bare hands. When the aliens finally overwhelmed his position, they found something that would become legend throughout. The Galaxy Jiho had been killed, but around his body lay the remains of more than 50 alien soldiers. His rifle was empty. His pistol was discharged, and scattered nearby were improvised weapons made from rocks and alien technology. The scene told the story of a warrior who had refused to surrender even when facing impossible odds. Alien forensic specialists determined that he had continued fighting for over an hour after receiving wounds that should have been fatal. He had been driven by nothing but the determination to protect innocent people. Admiral Korax arrived with the reinforcement fleet to find his invasion force shattered and demoralized. The destruction of the command ship had disrupted their entire operation, and the psychological impact of fighting the Death Shadow had broken the spirit of the surviving soldiers. Instead of continuing the attack, Korax made a decision that shocked the Galactic Council. He ordered his forces to withdraw from the planet without harming the human colony. In his official report, he wrote that any species capable of producing warriors like Park Jiho should be approached with extreme caution. Dr. Kim Nari and the other colonists erected a monument at the mountain pass where Jiho had made his final stand. The inscription read simply, "Here stood one human against impossible odds. He stood because others could not. He fought because others would not. He died because others might live." The story of the Death Shadow spread throughout the galaxy, becoming legend among both humans and aliens. Military academies studied his tactics. Alien commanders warned their troops about the psychological impact of fighting human snipers. Diplomats referenced his sacrifice during treaty negotiations. Human space forces adopted his tactics and philosophy, turning individual snipers into force multipliers who could disrupt entire enemy armies through precision shooting and psychological warfare. The threat of facing another warrior like Park Jiho became one of humanity's most effective deterrents against alien aggression. Years later, when the colonists returned to Earth, they shared their story with military historians and government officials. Jiho became a symbol of human courage and determination. His photograph was displayed in training facilities, and his methods were taught to elite soldiers throughout human space. But perhaps the most important legacy was simpler. No alien force ever again attempted to invade a human world without carefully considering whether they might face another sniper like Park Jiho. In a galaxy full of advanced weapons and terrible technologies, the memory of one human with a rifle had become the ultimate deterrent. The motto that Dr. Kim Nari reported from his final radio transmission was adopted by sniper units throughout human military forces. Every shot counts. Every life matters. Every stand is worth taking. These words reminded soldiers that individual courage and determination could change the course of history. And in the darkness between stars, alien soldiers still told stories about the Death Shadow, who proved that sometimes one human with the will to fight could be worth more than an entire army. The legend of Park Jiho had made humanity feared and respected throughout the galaxy.